it's time for Measure Twice.
Hello, welcome to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors and Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential, and you're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We are brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops with the showroom now open in Granger, right next to C. Kramer Interiors. And Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You could visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. I got to admit, today's topic, it was hard to get the show started because when you find out what the topic was about, you can imagine where Chris's mind went. And it was just, we had to get all the, high school sophomore stuff out so that we could start the show and families can listen. Is really what I'm getting at here. Today's about lumber, wood, if you will. Now I'll allow the audience now to get the sophomore jokes out of their head so that we can be a family show.
Family show, okay.
But hey, lumber's been a topic of conversation for a decade because of it started with deforestation or what have you, and then then it became scarce because of COVID. There's been one thing after another hammering that industry. And I want to, when I've read about lumber, everybody talks about, when you throw away a piece of paper, it's like, oh, I got a place in the rainforest. First of all, I just want to set something straight. They don't make paper out of, mahogany.
No,
no. That's not actually, most paper is made out of grass that's fast growing. So it's not necessary. It's almost a replenishable product.
Yeah.
If you will. Or bamboo. It's a little expensive. But again, if you've ever seen bamboo grow, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem at all. It's right there. If you're worried about the rainforest, it's beef.
Yep.
It's actually cattle. They clear land in the rainforest to make room for massive cattle farms because South America's supplying the world with beef.
Mm-hmm.
Is really what, and not so much America. Like America, we supply ourselves with beef. But you got to pay attention because you could be getting Brazilian
or
Argentine beef. But
I didn't realize Chris knew so much about beef.
Yeah.
Look at him.
Ponderosa, that's where their beef came from, was Argentina.
That's right. His past is in food management.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I didn't know Ponderosa was in the fold.
Yeah, they're not even around anymore.
No.
They used to get their beef from Argentina, their steaks.
Back then. Wow. There's a difference. There is a difference. But we're not talking about like deforestation today. We're talking about what does lumber mean? What is it? And you had just read an article about it.
Yes, yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Show prep, buddy.
Yeah, I just happened upon this article on the article was basically why you should buy a house built before 1980, and it had to do with the quality of lumber, because the lumber that is being used today the trees aren't grown to maturity; they're quick harvested, and so the wood is not the old growth or the heavier lumber that was used in the past. So it's more susceptible to rot, termites. So essentially, the article said if a house built before 1980 will last longer than a house that's being built today.
What happened in 1980?
I don't know. That's just their time reference.
Okay.
They were basically saying that's when they stopped using old growth lumber. It had been depleted by that point.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you can find old growth lumber and build your house out of it. Like if you had unlimited resources, like money was no object.
There's lots of salvaged lumber out there.
Because that's the key, right? If we had been able to get it, let's say the only business we could go into was the lumber business, but we had a time machine, I would probably go back in time and salvage houses that were about to be destroyed and take the lumber out in some way.
Yeah.
Because you can, if you're careful, right, you can probably do that. Maybe not get 100% out, but
yeah,
right. But that you can find old growth lumber, like you can if you look for it.
Cherry Pickers is full of it.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, their whole downstairs was all old lumber.
Yeah. They have a big storage facility now too. So
What's the Joel like working with old lumber? Is it different than working with?
oh yeah.
What's different about it?
It's harder. Typically. Like nailers don't love it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, so it's hard to penetrate the like. Is that the problem?
Oh yeah, it can be.
And that's just because it just dries out, right? Or is it just is it, I guess not. No,
Part
it's
of it is
actually the
graining.
growth, right?
It's
If the grain's
grain.
so tight,
Yeah.
And all I can think about right now are like studs, but that's not the only lumber in the world. But all I can think about in my mind is like, no, there's probably 2x12. There's all kinds of,
there's siding material,
Yeah.
wood siding.
Beams. All kinds of stuff.
and when you work with that, you have to take that into consideration then, right? Because it probably doesn't want to get cut either.
It's hard on your blades. It's hard on your saws. You go through a number of blades while you're working with it, which is fine.
And the other thing is you can physically feel the difference in the weight.
It's typically heavier quite a bit.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
And that's because there's more protein. I don't know what else to call it. Like
Fiber.
more fiber.
I think it'd be
That's
fiber,
a better
yeah.
word. There's just more fiber per square inch.
It's a denser. It's denser.
Mm-hmm.
So you can feel it for sure. If you would have the same size 2x4, typically they're a little bit bigger too, because now we have what they call nominal sizing for 2x, and so it's like a 2x4 is 1.5 inches by 3.5 roughly.
And back then they were 2 inches by 4 inches.
Yeah, like legit.
Well, it's interesting because Joel did some work on my house last year, and he saved the siding that he could save, and it's in the garage. So I'm replacing some siding on the house, and I thought, well, I'm going to use what Joel saved. I tell you what, I bought pine siding, and the difference, like you said, nailing it in was quite a bit different than current pine. I mean, the pine just, it's not a big deal at all. The other one was like, oh.
Yeah, I consider pine like easy to kind of work with, right? I mean,
But the old growth was heavier and more dense, and it was a little more difficult getting the hammer, because I used to hammer a nail. I don't have a nail gun.
right.
But yeah, pounding that in took a little more effort
And
out of the new lumber.
but that translates to like power, or not power, strength,
Yeah,
right?
just longevity.
Which is kind of amazing. Like you think about wood and you're like, the properties of wood, I think, are kind of amazing. Like you can build a ship out of wood, something that's going to float, and you can build, big structures out of wood when you engineer it properly. It's kind of amazing. Like it's really kind of amazing to think that there's some point where the wood actually becomes pretty much like steel. It's probably not equal ever, but
Right.
boy, darn close, and it's that natural drying, that tight fiber.
The natural
old growth.
drying makes a difference too. Like Chris's house, that would have all been put on green and dried in place. And so when it dries, as it's shrinking, while it's drying naturally, it becomes stronger.
Right. If you've ever tried to pull a nail out of an old, like something like that was put in green and then dried,
It's like,
it's like easier to cut the nail
Yeah.
than it is to try to pull it
Oh, yeah.
out, because because it dries, shrinks right around that nail, and it's just an unbelievable bond. My brother's house, when we were fixing his basement, could not pull. We had to cut all the nails.
Yeah.
Because they just weren't going to come out. They just weren't going to come out. And when you were talking about putting in green, Joel, you're saying that they probably cut the tree down.
Yeah, it was probably from the property.
Yeah.
Or around there.
And put right into the house. So it was like a living,
Milled and
it was a living type
Yeah.
of environment there. And that's, you don't see a lot of that. I mean, that probably stopped somewhere in the 30s, right? I mean,
yeah, it would have been like 30s, 40s.
right? Because that's I'm sure there are some houses, some places that did that, but generally, big lumber, so to speak, kind of started to advance.
Well, yeah,
with
like around the
World War II.
1900s is when you started seeing like the kit houses from Sears and
My brother lived in.
Aladdin
yeah.
and some of those others that made those. And that kind of was the impetus for lumber yards.
And then they started to pop up and mass produce.
Mm-hmm.
And
But it was still old growth.
exactly
Yeah.
right. And that's the whole
Lumber.
point. The lumber may have had time to dry, but it was still old. Still has that feel, which is not replaceable. You can't just reproduce that naturally. Like, it's got to happen.
Over, you can do it naturally, but not in our lifetime.
Right. It's just you're preparing for your grandkids.
Yeah.
When we come back, let's go into some different types of lumber that's old growth. This is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling and Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential, and you're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops, with the showroom now open in Granger next to C. Kramer Interiors. We're talking about old growth. So basically, Chris, and I'm just kidding, Chris.
I'm old growth.
He is. I'm old growth too.
I don't know about growth, but I'm old.
Yeah, you and I stopped growing a while back.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, a long time ago.
No, I'm not a young sapwood. I'm old growth.
Chris had read an article about why a house built before 1980, and that's probably just the average, right?
Yeah, I think that's just a general year.
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily
Why
you can't
it's
say 1980.
why it's sturdier. Like, there's no we don't have a reason why 1980 is the year. We assume that it's just a generalization. But why the wood in those houses is better than, or stronger, or at least different than the wood you see in houses today. And old growth is meaningful. So we don't have a scientific study of at what point is this tree old growth. But I would imagine, if a tree is 70 years old, that's different than a tree that's 25 years old or 20 years old.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they're getting at.
And if we even let them get to 20 years old.
Right. And pine grows fast. So if you're looking at pine, they grow tall, then out, tall, then out. They grow like a human, Most trees, I guess, get high, go up and then get wider. There's got to be somewhere a system where they measure around a tree and they go, okay, this one's ready to go. This one's
Oh, yeah,
not
I'm sure
ready
it's
to
a
go.
science.
Yeah. But we're talking about the difference between old and new growth. And Chris, you had mentioned that you had sap still coming out of
Some siding at my house. Yeah.
that's 1870.
Right. That addition was 1870.
First of all, just to wrap my mind around, that all the things that happened around 1870 in the United States. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're not even 10 years removed from the Civil War.
right.
But that's just the addition. The main house is 1832. So think about 1832.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they're dealing with, really hard wood to work with then, I suppose, right? And they're all doing that by hand, right? I mean, they're older. When they make a 2x4 out of a tree, they have to figure out how many they can get out of it,
Oh, yeah.
right? I mean, that's the first thing you got to do, or whatever they need. But what kind of tool are they using back then? Is it just planes and?
They didn't have electricity. So
Yeah.
they weren't exactly.
It's all hand run or, I don't know that they would have had, I'm not sure how they would have milled it. I mean, they would have had some mills, but those mills would have been like water powered or
Right.
something like that.
On a big job like that, probably would be worth it to bring that in.
Yeah.
I still have bark on some of my framing material at the house. You can see where they framed like the staircase, and you can see that there's bark on the lumber yet from when they cut it.
That's cool.
It is.
That is really neat. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's like having a slice of history.
Yeah.
Like right there. It's wow. People pay a lot of money for that, by the way.
Well, and you have to realize that in early 1830, this is all wilderness. I mean,
Right.
it hadn't been settled yet.
Or farmed, right?
Or farmed. It was all wilderness. It was actually anything north of Indy was considered wilderness. So to move here and to settle here and be a farmer, you had to clear your acreage.
Oh, yeah. And it's not, it's not like there's not roots. When I was visiting Boston to go to Concord, Massachusetts, shot heard around the world. Everybody should go there once as an American.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, right? And I asked him, I was like, wow, look at all these, woods that are here. And it must have been just guerrilla warfare, fighting here. He goes, no, this was completely clear because these were farmers. They came in and cleared it. And I was like, wow, so they just cut down the trees and started farming. And he stopped and he said, sir, these trees have roots. You can't farm on top of roots. So it took him a year to dig all the trees out.
Think about it.
I'm thinking, and this is, 1600.
Yeah.
This was 1600s because this is pre.
Yeah, that's pre a Revolutionary War.
He's like, they're using axes and shovels to go down, and then they have to find dirt because I hadn't thought of that. Like, you're not just removing a tree.
Right.
If you want to farm on it, you've also got to remove the root. There's a tree under the tree.
Yeah.
That you've got to. I never conceptualized that.
But doesn't it amaze you that they did it without power tools? I mean, this was all done by hand.
Yeah. Right.
How long would it take to clear 700 acres?
And how many calories do you have to find in that forest so that you're fed well enough to swing a pick and to swing, an axe and an amazing amount of work.
Yeah, the effort that went into that.
Right. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing.
And so why a house still stands when it was built in 1830.
Or 1700 or what, because you see a lot of that out on the East Coast.
You're not going to do all that and then do it wrong when you build the house.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The risk reward is not favorable. Right? I mean, if you had to dig a 18-foot hole to remove a tree or whatever it was, 6-foot hole.
That's just one tree.
Yeah, one at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah. To farm.
Yep, exactly.
I suppose to build a house, you could probably just take it down to the ground and then not worry about it. But if your house, somebody was farming.
Right.
So you cared about that lumber. It was it was very important to you. Very, very important.
Yeah.
And so, when you're looking at an old house, you could probably be rest assured that if it's still standing today, it was done right when it was built. The houses that weren't done right probably are not here.
Exactly.
Right? They just went away. That's pretty amazing stuff when you think about what it took to get the lumber, like planning and talent and measuring twice.
Yeah.
Right? You miscut a board that you had to hone from a tree. Oh my goodness.
Oh, don't worry, we have 700 more. We have plenty of trees.
Now it takes us 4 days to get that tree down.
Yeah, that's right. And another 2 weeks to plane it and cut it into lumber.
I just can't even.
I can't either.
Can't even imagine it. It's pretty amazing.
We can't really comprehend how things were built back then based on what we know today.
Yeah, it's hard. That lens fogs are.
Yeah, you don't go to the store and buy your brick. I mean,
you make a brick.
You make a brick. The bricks on my house were made on site.
But before you make the brick, you got to make a kiln.
Yep. Yeah. And we don't just they didn't just go to a lumber yard and buy lumber. It was, this is what we have to work with. This is what we're using.
Right.
Yeah. In the age of social media, the idea of what it took to actually build that house.
Farm of land.
Yeah.
I mean, just to live.
I mean, the Amish would have been cutting edge technology back then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they...
You know, like we look at Amish like, wow, they're still got horses and stuff. And it's like back then, the Amish are probably buying their plows that were assembled by John Deere or implement company. Back then, it was like, okay, now I got to build a forge because I got to make a plow. You know, like I got to figure this out. Like it was all, every single thing. Oh, boy. But look at what you have. You have stuff that's still standing. We're talking about old lumber and old, like why that is sturdier. And we're kind of at the point where it's like you had to cut down a tree, the whole tree, use every inch of the tree.
Yep.
They probably used the ash from the leaves in a garden. I mean, they probably used everything.
Oh, yeah. You don't waste the parts and pieces of it.
You figure it out. You know, you figure out what you're going to use it for. When you run into this stuff, Joel, like you've had like projects where you're dealing with like really super old houses. How do you connect old, you know, the old part with the new part? Does it mend together well, or do you have to?
Yeah, I mean, there's times where you have to. I mean, like I talked about, the dimensions of the lumber are different, so you have to account for that. But yeah, you can build it out any way you want, and as long as when it's finished, it looks old.
That's the key. When we come back, let's talk about the different forms of lumber because the dimensions were different. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, probably, of really the differences of it. When we come back, this is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors and Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential. And you're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything, windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops, with the showroom now open in Granger, right next to C. Kramer Interiors and Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. We're talking about old growth, old wood compared to new wood. Why Chris had read an article about houses pre-'80s being structurally the wood in those houses being old growth and stronger than what we use today. And you had mentioned something when you had Dean from Hoosier Hardwood Floors come over, that your floors were, you know, just clearly made with whatever they had around without really concern with continuity or, you know.
Yeah, there's no continuity. I mean, there's different size floorboards, planks are all different size. It's 1.5 inches thick versus 3/4.
So, but that was the same, right? They were all pretty much an inch and a half.
All 1.5 inches thick.
Right. You were talking about the widths and lengths were
different.
just.
It's the thickness of 2 wood floors.
Yeah.
What's the average thickness of a wood floor right now?
3/4 inch.
3/4. That's pretty much standard.
That's standard.
And there was.
Well, and that would have been over top of the subfloor.
There's no subfloor.
Yeah.
There's no subfloor in yours. Oh.
Took the question right out of my head. What's under that?
Nothing.
That's 1.5 inches. That explains the 1.5 inches.
It's all. I mean, it's just the floor joist nailed right to the floor joist.
Wow.
Joel's face is precious. He's like, oh, that makes it kind of hard to lay a floor because you're standing on joists.
I mean, you run into that periodically where it's your subfloor is the floor. It's just Chris's is really, really nice. So it's way nicer than a lot of them that I've seen.
Wouldn't it run the risk of being wavy?
It has more movement.
Yeah.
But it's not wavy, right? It's not like you don't look at it and you can see where the joists are.
No.
Yeah, I think if it was thinner, not as thick,
that would make a difference. But also, you got to take into account like the the lumber we have now moves more because it's not as stable. So if you were doing it on the lumber we have now, your floor would definitely be wavy.
Because it would just contour to where the joists are. That would
And those joists are going to move a lot. A twist, warp.
Okay.
It's just because they move a lot more because structurally I can't even remember what it is now, like a handful of growth rings per inch now when it used to be like 30. It's a ridiculous difference.
Right. And that's going to twist, which is okay. Right.
Yeah. I mean it doesn't, it's,
but you need to have a subfloor over it.
Oh, yeah.
So that, that movement is separate from your floor's movement.
yeah.
Right. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, I mean, I guess that's where some of the products that we use in the innovation that has had to happen makes it so your subfloor materials are so much better than they were 30 years ago. Some of your sheeting products. So you could still have a good quality house. It's just some of that strength is not there that was in old wood.
Well, and it's not like code, or it's not like our technology or our methodology didn't, move with the difference in lumber. It's like we didn't innovate backwards to make things weaker, right? I mean, it's not like you'd.
No, and there are standards, and they test lumber, and those standards will change every couple of years. So, for example, like 15 years ago, what we could use a 2x8 on, we're probably having to use a 2x10 now.
Oh, I see.
For spans.
So they're accounting for maybe a weaker,
for the structural value of the lumber.
Right. Better said, yeah. And that's how they're doing it. And if you ever were to go and look, right, the standards on the end of the 2x4, right, you can see the little, in some, not every one of them, but like there's like a stapled like thing that tells you. Like,
it tells you what it is.
And then,
but standard, like some of the like structural value stuff, you just have to look it up or
how do you
ask somebody.
Stay up to date on that?
The beauty of it is I work with lumber yards and they keep up with that.
Okay, they're the ones that say, okay, here's
right.
the.
So I'll give them a plan and they'll work it out based off of spans and heights and all that stuff and say, okay, well, this is what the lumber that needs to be used for this. It's engineered for that. And, then you've got your LVLs, which is laminated veneer lumber. And there's other engineered 2x material also. And I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we go more that direction in the next 10 years, just for the structural stability.
So do you see like laminates getting into like the studding and type thing? I
mean, that's already a thing. We don't see it really that much. Something that you see more is finger jointed studs. And the finger joining now compared to 20 years ago is so much better. And really, structurally, those studs are stronger than if you're buying just so if I get a 2x4 by 10 foot stud, if it's finger jointed, it's structurally stronger than just a full 10 foot.
So you're gonna have to explain finger joining.
I was just gonna ask him that.
So tell us what you mean by finger joining.
So if you would so before it's put together, the ends it's kind of like V notches that are longer, maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch long. It gets glued together, and then you've got maybe 16 inch sections that are
that's what I was getting
glued
at.
together.
I was like, is it in the middle or is it?
I was going to ask the same question. Is that the end?
They're shorter sections of 2x material.
Do you happen to know why that came about?
I'm not sure why it came about. I do know that it used to be something that we would consider trash.
Right.
Is it because they can't get a strong enough length in a piece of current lumber? So they finger joint it for strength?
I think that might be part of it. And with the technology now, it's so much better. It is.
But and another question, when you say laminated, does that mean it's like layers glued together?
Laminated veneer, LVL is, yes.
Is it?
It's not like an OSB. An OSB is like oriented strand board. It's the sheeting that you see, and it's pieces.
Looks like a jigsaw puzzle of wood, right?
Of pieces of, chunks, basically.
Yeah.
Right. But an LVL, to me, in my mind, right, the LVL looks like that OSB, but
it's not. It's like thin layers. It's almost like plywood.
Right.
They're glued together.
But they're super strong, right? I mean, like
it's literally thinly sliced veneer pieces. I've seen the process done. It's pretty cool.
And that is super strong.
That's extremely strong.
And lighter than steel, right? Like,
oh yeah. I mean, steel's great,
right,
but it's lighter than steel.
But that's kind of interesting because that's our way. Like maybe 200 years from now they'll be like, yes, and then what they did was they put finger joints in the brilliant.
Yeah.
They did what they had to do, because we tend to forget that there's going to be a 200 years from now, and they're going to look back and see the stuff that we did, and we might seem barbaric.
Right.
What we're doing, you know what I mean? Or amazing to them. Like, do you believe that they had to use a truck to go get the wood? I don't know. We don't know what that's going to be like. But looking back, right, they didn't have to finger joint anything. It was plentiful to them. It was just hard to harvest.
Right.
Now we have easy to harvest, but it's created scarcity because it's too easy. And it's too.
Right.
Here's the thing, and I'll get on a little bit of a high horse. It's too easy to justify waste when something was easy to come by, and we put less of a value on that waste. And based on the name of our show, Measure Twice, we're kind of like opposed to waste.
Yeah.
We don't want waste. We want complete usage when we can. That's our conservation. Like, take a piece of material, cherish it, and use it correctly. Right? Would you agree, Joel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how we conserve.
Well, and that's what we talk. I mean, even with space, like what we talk about with Chris, like you don't want to just have space and not have it be functional or usable and pleasant to the eye. I mean, we try not to waste anything.
Right. And old growth, I mean, that is a textbook, don't waste because of all the work you had to do.
Well, and you want your space to be well constructed. It's what you don't see that's critical for longevity.
Right.
You don't when you're looking at a house, you don't peer in behind the walls and see what's
right. You don't get the opportunity.
So you're assuming that everything is
gonna be there. Yeah. And
in the right place.
Well, when we come back, we'll wrap it up and maybe get some new ideas from old growth. How do you like that? This is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling and Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential. And you're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, countertops, and more, with a showroom right now open next to... I was trying to rearrange it. I don't know why I was trying to make it special.
It's very special now.
It is special. But let me just say this. The showroom's now open right next to C. Kramer Interiors in Granger. There you go. And Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. I bet they run into old growth, and that's their skinny, is making things look, like they've never, like it's always been that way. And you had mentioned that, Joel.
They have to get in some old growth and make it.
Right. So when you're doing a project, Joel, when you're doing a project, Chris, you you're matching old growth, but you had said something in passing like you got to make it look old, right? Like you said, yeah, you can. The dimensions are different, so you have some engineering things that you got to figure out to make sure that whatever you're remodeling works. But the key is that to make it look like when you drive by, it doesn't look stand out like what is that?
Yeah.
Like that's the key.
Kind of like Soldier Field.
Kind of like Soldier Field. That's really funny.
That is hilarious. That was good.
Yeah.
That hurts me. I remember when it wasn't like that.
I know, me too.
And it hurts me.
It's like they landed a spaceship on it
exactly.
or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty. It's yeah. Well, you don't
That's
want
a good
that.
analogy.
You don't want that,
No.
right? So that. What are techniques to do that?
Well, there are times where we have to just use old growth and make stuff.
Really?
Yeah, typically that's on the inside of the house. On the exterior, you can get, so if you're dealing with brick, you have to find salvaged brick.
I mean, brick. Oh yeah, you're right, because that all weathered at the same time.
Yeah, and you find like from periods of time brick was similar, so you can and if you're a lot of times what we'll do, like, so if we're doing an addition on a house that's brick, an old brick house, you can find brick that's very close, save as much as you can off of what you're taking down for your addition, and then it gets buckshotted back in,
right,
so that it all blends. There are other things that you can do. I mean, if you have to, you can work with somebody that can come in and make the brick look old. We've done that before, architectural artists.
And when you say make it look old, though, I think what you were getting at is like architecturally, it looks like.
Yeah, you want to make sure
design.
it looks like it belongs there.
Right. And Chris, when you're doing that, because you run into that too, people's styles might be from a different time, so to speak, or you might run into homes that are old and you have to design around that. Do you ever have to match eras?
Match eras?
Yeah, in a
You
house.
mean like a Victorian or whatever?
Something like that, yeah.
As far as the like interior trim details and things of that nature,
Right.
so that it doesn't look like you changed or added something modern.
Because wouldn't your eye go
take
right
it
to
back
it?
to what it should have been.
Yeah.
That's
It's more the case.
right. That's okay. That's kind of what I was getting at. Like you're
It had, if it had been remodeled somewhere in its history and it doesn't match the original, and you're trying to take it back.
the Soldier Field effect,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yes. Well, oof.
I think when I think of this, the first thing that pops into my head though are windows. It's like that really can stand out. Like if you're
If you're
looking
not
at a house.
careful with your windows, they will stand out.
and in the wrong way, like it'll
Look at it on.
Mm-hmm.
right and be all you can see. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a house at the corner of I don't know if I can call it out on the radio, but it's in the Twickenham area that's getting redone. It's a pretty prominent house, and they're taking it back to the original look of the house, and it is a major undertaking. What they found was that the original is still under there. Like they just built out over it
Mhm.
twice.
Interesting.
So the bad news is they can't use any of it because it's just, it's kind of deteriorated. But the good news is they have like a blueprint.
Something to go off of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was only one photograph of the front of the house in all of its history. It's a super old house. And I'll tell you off air so
Huh.
you don't get looky-loos going by this poor person's house. But there was only one picture of the entrance of the house, and it is completely different than the entrance that's there now. When I say completely different, like the entrance there now is tiny. The front of the house had a structure on the front of it. And that's kind of amazing, and when they did the renderings, it's unbelievable. It's like, why would anybody get rid of this,
Right.
for whatever reason? Maybe it burned down, maybe, I don't know. But that is a classic case of all this old wood behind there, right, that they have, and it's old sheathing. like old, because it's
Shiplap.
yes,
Sheeting.
Oh, that's cool.
that is pretty neat, huh? Like I don't know how you make that look. I don't know how you blend that. I mean, you'd have to take all Cherry Picker's inventory. Yeah, I don't know, like right because
But that's just the sheeting.
yeah,
You don't.
I guess you don't have to. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's behind the
Yeah.
behind the scenes there.
You just have to make sure it's even or the same.
Did they have sheathing back then?
No, most of that would have been like 10 inch shiplap.
That's it.
That's what
So
was
there's no
used.
such thing as a plywood.
No, it was straight up wood.
So you've run into houses where a house built, modern house would have all plywood, and you've gone back and you found shiplap.
Oh yeah,
And do you
Oh, yeah.
replace it with shiplap, or do you use plywood at that point?
it depends on what you have. What you have.
If it's in good shape, probably not, right?
That and like if you're. I mean, we're working on one right now. No, it's a major exterior remodel, and that it's all shiplap, but it's in pretty good shape. There's some places that we had to patch. Well, we're not gonna. It's all getting covered up, so there's no sense in matching shiplap to that.
Just keep it structurally the way it's supposed
Right.
to be, and then you move along.
Right.
Is there a benefit that shiplap has over plywood?
And shiplap is good at, like, if water does get behind what's there, it's good at keeping water out because
of the way it's designed.
shiplap.
Yeah.
Is shiplap? This is on the. Is this the structure of the house or the exterior siding of the house?
It's not the siding; it's the sheeting.
underneath the
Yeah,
the shingle or whatever they're.
yeah.
or
It's
whatever.
right now it's lap.
Lap. Because wouldn't shiplap? Do they cross run the grain? So one grain runs one way, one grain runs another, so that they kind of
Would move.
don't move. It's more stable because the movement is because they're kind of working against themselves, so you don't have the movement, you don't have the warpage. I don't know. I'm asking
I don't know.
because they do.
I guess I haven't really thought about that.
Because if you're that's how they make solid wood furniture. They run the grains opposing each other, so you have less movement.
Right. We're out of time. Old growth is now new. Thanks for listening. This has been Measure Twice.
Podcasts by Federated Media.